hey guys, so I just really like making these political map videos, so that's kind of why they keep coming out. I don't know why I like making them, but I do. So anyway, today I'm going to be looking at something that's a little less hypothetical than some of the stuff I've covered before, and that is, how could future elections play out if current demographic trends hold? So I'm using the data from the 2020 election, how much each candidate won in that. And then I am taking these numbers and shifting them 2 points to the left or right, so every 4 years. So for example, let's say Pennsylvania is one of the states that's getting redder. So in 2020, it goes for Biden by 1.2 points. But in 2024, it would go for whoever the Republican candidate is by 0.8 points. So that's basically how it works. And just so you know, my definitions for tilt, lean, likely, and safe are: it's less than 1 point for tilt, 1 to 3 points for lean, 3 to 5 points for likely, and 5 plus points for safe. And because I really think that that does a good job of demonstrating what states might flip in the near future, and what states could be won by a candidate if they tried hard enough and stuff. So now that we got all that out of the way, let's take a look at what we're actually gonna see. And by the way, which states are getting bluer and redder, almost every state, I think, is shifting towards the left, with the exception of probably the Midwest and North Carolina and Florida, because those are states that have demographic changes that are causing them to shift right. And the reason that these demographic changes happen are complicated enough that I won't get into them in this video, but still. So what are we looking at here? Well, as you can see, one of the bluest parts of the country, the blue wall, is kind of breaking down a bit. Michigan's still blue, but Wisconsin and Pennsylvania have flipped, which that's really the only big change in 2024, assuming these shifts actually come to fruition. Because everywhere else, you see narrowing of margins, you see widening of margins, but apart from that, those are the only two states that actually flip. But as you can see, Arizona and Georgia are shifting, are bluer by way bigger margins than in 2020. They're less toss-up states and more safe, and they're more safe Democratic states. Still not completely safe. A Republican candidate could still win them if they tried hard enough. But for the most part, they're probably gonna stay blue. And Nevada, I think it's shifting bluer, but I'm not completely sure. But I'm assuming it is, because the Southwest is one of the big shifting blue areas of the nation. And Nevada's part of it. So yeah. So assuming that Nevada does shift blue in 2024, it would go by a likely margin. And the state that I'm really watching here is Texas. Because Texas, under this scenario, the Republican candidate would win by just 3.5 points in 2024, which is not a lot. Again, that's margins where if a Democratic candidate tried really, really hard, they could flip the state. But it's not super likely. I do think that Texas will flip eventually, and you'll see that later in the video. But I don't think 2024 is going to be the year. Taking these margins, what can we expect 4 more years down the line in 2028 or even in 2032? Keep in mind I'm using the 2024 electoral map, so that's why some of the electoral votes are a little different in some states than they are in 2020, because the electoral votes generally reflect the population. And by the way, now using these even with Wisconsin and Pennsylvania flipping, the Democrats would still win, but by a pretty narrow margin. So what will happen in 2028? Well, while 2028 has even fewer flips, it only has 1. But that flip is really critical because the state that's flipping is Michigan. then with Michigan going red in 2020 and 2028, so the Republicans would effectively win. That's all they need to do: flip Michigan, which considering how narrow the margin would be in 2024, that would actually be kind of easy to do. Still, the Democrats could still win Michigan if they tried hard enough. Because this is only a lean margin right there, which is only a couple points. But even then, the Democrats could still win if they tried. But the Republicans are just more likely to win in 2028. However, the margins will definitely change in several states. So Nevada becomes solid, Arizona becomes likely, Georgia also becomes likely, and Wisconsin becomes likely, and Pennsylvania becomes lean, and also North Carolina becomes solid, and last but not least, Texas becomes lean. Now, which means that Texas will be another super competitive state in 2028. So, because in 2028, because using these shifts, the Republicans would win by only 1.5 points, which is super narrow, and it makes the Democrats more likely to win. But it's probably gonna stay red, but it's gonna be a super competitive red state, but still a red state. And because of that, the Republicans win by a nice margin in 2028. So this would give them an opportunity to regain control of the government for one last time, because after this point, the leftward shifts become so big that they become so big that the Republicans might not win the Electoral College ever again, because that might not actually be the case. But assuming this actually happens, it could be a long time before things start trending their way again. And the reason why I think that is because when we move on to 2032, then the Democrats flip Texas. They would flip Texas by a very narrow margin, only about half a point, but they would still flip it. So, and in other news, Arizona becomes solid, Georgia also becomes solid, Pennsylvania becomes likely, Wisconsin becomes solid, and Michigan becomes likely. And last but not least, Alaska. Alaska has been one of those states that's had a huge democratic shift in the past couple decades. In 2004, it went red by 31 points, and now it's went red by 10. So it could obviously be even bluer than what I'm about to show. But having different margins for having different shifts for different states is too complicated right now. But that still makes Alaska a likely state. And we end up with the Democrats winning 299 votes in the Electoral College. Truth is, Texas is the only state that flipped, but it's a big one. And the thing is, it could be an even bigger one, because by 2032, these electoral vote counts will probably be outdated. Because every decade, we take a census that determines what the population is. And based off of that census, we allocate electoral votes to states as needed. For example, a state like Florida, that's growing really fast. In 2020, it had 28 or 29 electoral votes. However, because it's been growing in population so quickly, then it's one of those states that needs to get more votes to represent their increased population. So they now have 31 electoral votes. And assuming Florida continues to grow rapidly, then in 2032, it'll probably have even more electoral votes than that. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mark Minnesota as likely, but that's besides the point. It's still pretty democratic. So here's the thing. Once the Democrats flip Texas, then it's going to get really tough for the Republicans to win. Because after this, assuming the Midwest state continues on its trend, rightward shift, and as well as North Carolina and Florida, but everywhere else continues on its leftward shift, then we'll eventually reach a map that looks something like this. What I'm showing is like something like that. Actually, West Virginia would be blue, but that's besides the point. Basically, if the this would be basically what happens if the Midwest continues to trend redder, but the rest of the country continues to trend bluer. But we have a position where like the Republicans still have some representation in certain state governments, and like they would still have like some Senate seats in crucial states like the Midwest and the Southeast. But apart from that, the Democrats would basically have a lock on the government, which is kind of crazy, if you ask me. The chances are, if this happens, it's probably going to be many decades from now, because states like Wyoming are not going to flip for a very long time, if they ever flip. Like, it would take some crazy campaigning to flip Wyoming in the near future, and same goes for West Virginia. So yeah, I hope you guys all enjoyed this video about predicting what future elections might look like. So as always, I would appreciate it if you would like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay tuned for future content. Thanks and have a great day.